because he just kind of fell in with them. He had no feelings about his friends, to speak of. In fact, preferred to be alone. The 13-year-old was a brute, a rough figure of a human being God had sculpted out of clay but forgotten to fill in the features. They waited until sundown. When it was good and dark, the 4 young outlaws gave their horses a nudge with their spurs, broke cover as they rode out from where they'd waited out of sight in the woods. Drawing their guns, the gang kept low in their saddles and trotted out onto the grounds of the ranch, sticking to the shadows. The place was pretty big, a large buck and rail stockade filled with cows, a 2-door barn adjacent, a farmhouse on the far side of the corral, on the hill. Everything was quiet. The kid looked over the spread in the hazy moonlight and didn't see any people in the area, just lots of steers and rows of shoulders and hindquarters and longhorns stretching off into the darkness. One of his friends said something about them having so many cows they weren't going to miss a few, but the kid couldn't hear or see who said it because he was riding in the rear and saw only the backs of the others' heads in the dim. They were riding around the stockade to find the gate and a way to get in. The 13-year-old guessed. He just followed the others' lead, not caring one way or the other. The hooves of their horses squelched in the mud. The smell of cow shit was strong. A slap of a hand on a mosquito made the kid's gaze snap front as Billy Joe wiped the bug off the flesh of his neck. The kid grabbed the coil of rope in his saddle, not knowing how to rustle a cow, but figuring a lasso was probably part of it. It was almost too dark to see, but not quite. Resuming his inspection of their surroundings, the kid looked for any sign of people. A quarter of a mile off, the large timber ranch house sat atop the hill, overlooking the buck and rail cattle stalls. A light burned in a kerosene lamp in a window, but there was no movement. He couldn't see a living soul. The smell of cow dung and dirty cattle hides filled his nostrils. The lowing of the steers was intermittent. Sounds of their penned movement covered any noise their horses' hooves made in the mud. His friend's horses slowed. The would-be rustlers rode up to a gate made of hewn wooden posts with a sign atop the youths would have read as Q Ranch had any of them been able to read. Fatefully, the kid regarded the Q letters circle and squiggle and thought it reminded him of an upside-down hangman's noose. Seeing the flash, before he heard the gunshot, his saddle jerked downward as his horse dropped dead beneath him, tossing the kid headlong to the ground. The 13-year-old hit hard, but his skull was hard. Busy dodging rearing horses, the kid rolled out of the way to avoid getting trampled as hooves of the panicked animals came down and pounded the earth near his head. Then the boy was dodging the falling bodies of Clay, Jack, and Billy Joe as they got thrown from their saddles. The 3 good-for-nothing nags galloped off into the darkness in fear. Before he could get up, the kid heard the clicks of the hammers being pulled back on 3 rifles, very close by. He froze. It was a bad sound to hear from a gun when you were on the wrong end of it. They were all surrounded. The other boys heard the guns cocking too, and knew when they were beat, so the 4 did the smart thing. They all put up their hands. Crunching of boots on dirt sounded on 3 sides opposite the cattle stockade. The steps were menacingly slow and deliberate. The people making them were cloaked in darkness, that deep country dark you can't see anything a foot from your face. Exchanging glances, Clay, Billy Joe, and Jack looked very afraid of what would happen next. The kid, acting calm, figuring he would find out soon enough. None of them dared reach for their pistols. Out of the darkness, the rancher appeared first, a tall and skeletal figure in a weathered leather duster with long white hair. Hatred and meanness radiated off him. The old man's right hand was a mangled stump, missing 3 fingers. It looked like an axe had been taken to it once. One of those digits was on the trigger of an immense double-barreled scattergun, the left hand braced to his shoulder. "Get their weapons," he spat. "Disarm 'em." The rancher's sons, 2 boys the same age as the gang, appeared out of the shadows, holding revolvers. One was older than the other by a few years, it looked. Both boys were young and raw, but meant business. The older of them reached in and yanked the 6 pistols one by one from the hooligan's side holsters, handing them off in turn to his young brother. Neither of the rancher's sons said a word. Walking ominously over to a fence post that had coils of rope hung on it, the father unslung 4 lariats